At Christmas, my parents turned my 11-year-old daughter away at the door. She stood on their porch in Portland, Oregon, holding carefully wrapped gifts she had spent weeks preparing, only to be told there wasn't enough space for her inside. They made her walk home alone through the cold, carrying every present back with her, and she spent Christmas night in an empty house trying to cook a dinner she didn't know how to make. When I found out, I didn't yell, I didn't argue, I didn't give them the scene they expected. I took action. 5 hours later, the life they believed was secure began to fall apart. I got home later than I meant to on Christmas night. Portland was quiet in that soft, heavy way cities become after celebrations end. Snow wasn't common here, but a thin layer of frost covered the sidewalks, reflecting the glow of porch lights and blinking decorations. Through passing windows, I saw families gathered around tables, children still awake long past bedtime, laughter spilling into the cold air. My house was supposed to be empty. Chloe was meant to be at my parents' place. The big family Christmas she'd been counting down to all month. She talked about it constantly. Cousin games, Grandma Susan's desserts, staying up too late watching movies on the living room floor. She had wrapped every gift herself, refusing help because she wanted everything to be perfect. I remembered watching her walk up their driveway earlier that afternoon, boots crunching softly, arms full of carefully labeled bags. She didn't look back when I drove away. That memory followed me as I unlocked my front door hours later. The first thing I noticed wasn't silence. It was the smell. Burnt. Sharp enough to stop me mid-step. The kitchen light was on. A pan sat crooked on the stove, something blackened inside it. A plate rested on the table beside scattered crumbs, like someone had eaten slowly, carefully, trying not to make noise. Then I saw the boots, small ones, wet frost melting beneath them. My chest tightened instantly. "Chloe?" I called. A chair shifted softly. "I'm here." Her voice came from the kitchen table. She was still wearing the green sweater she'd chosen that morning, the one she said made her look extra festive. Her shoulders were pulled inward, hands folded neatly as if she were trying to disappear into the chair. For a moment, my brain refused to understand what I was seeing. "You're supposed to be at Grandma and Grandpa's," I said gently. She nodded without looking up. "I know." Something in her voice made my stomach drop. I set my keys down slowly. "Why are you home?" Her fingers tightened around the edge of the plate. "They said there wasn't enough space." The sentence didn't make sense. "Space?" I repeated. "For me." Silence filled the room. Outside, distant laughter drifted from somewhere down the street. I noticed the gift bags then, lined perfectly along the wall near the door. Tissue paper still fluffed, ribbons untouched. Every single present she had brought. "Why are the gifts here?" I asked quietly. "They didn't want them," she whispered. Cold spread through my chest. "They told you to take them back?" She nodded once. I forced my voice to stay calm. "Why didn't you call me?" "My phone died," she said softly. "I asked to use theirs, but Grandma said it would make things harder. Grandpa said it wasn't far and I could just walk." Walk. An 11-year-old on Christmas night. "How long?" I asked. "Maybe 20 minutes," she said. "I went the wrong way at first." I turned toward the stove. "You tried to cook?" Her cheeks flushed. "I got hungry," she murmured, "and I wanted it to feel like Christmas." That sentence hit harder than anything else she'd said. She hadn't cried, hadn't complained. She'd tried to rebuild the holiday alone. I opened the window to clear the smoke and sat beside her. "You didn't do anything wrong," I said quietly. She shook her head. "I think I ruined it." "No," I said firmly. "You didn't ruin anything." Tears slipped down her face anyway, quick and embarrassed. I pulled her into a hug, and she leaned into me instantly, like she had been holding herself together for hours, waiting for permission to stop. Outside, frost thickened along the glass. Inside, something shifted. I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't call my parents. Not yet. Chloe didn't need a fight echoing through the house. She needed warmth, safety, proof that one closed door didn't decide her worth. I made hot chocolate, extra marshmallows, and we sat quietly while the house slowly felt safe again. After a while, she fell asleep against my shoulder. I looked at the untouched gifts by the door, at the small handmade ornament she had made for my mother, and felt anger settle into something colder and clearer. Some stories don't change because someone shouts. They change because someone decides to see them through to the end. And sometimes the stories people stay for are the ones that quietly promise the truth hasn't finished unfolding yet. Chloe fell asleep before her hot chocolate cooled. Her head rested against my shoulder, breath uneven at first, then slow as exhaustion finally pulled her under. I stayed still long after my arm went numb, afraid that if I moved too soon, she'd wake and remember everything all over again. Outside, Christmas lights blinked across neighboring houses. Somewhere down the street, laughter drifted faintly through the cold air. Families finishing dinners, opening last gifts, living the night Chloe had imagined for weeks. This was supposed to be her Christmas too. Carefully, I eased my arm away and stood. The kitchen still smelled faintly burnt. I rinsed the pan under running water, black residue swirling down the drain, while my thoughts replayed her words again and again. There wasn't enough space. My eyes kept returning to the gift bags lined neatly by the door. That detail hurt the most. Even after being turned away, she had arranged everything carefully, like she was still trying to prove she belonged. I crouched beside them. Each tag was written in her careful handwriting. Grandpa David, Grandma Susan, Aunt Rachel, and one small box wrapped in gold paper. I already knew what it was. The ornament she had spent 3 evenings painting at the kitchen table, tongue pressed to the corner of her mouth while she concentrated. She'd asked me twice if it looked fancy enough. I turned it gently in my hands. Family first. The words felt heavier now. Behind me, the couch shifted. I didn't cry there, Chloe said quietly. I turned. She was awake, eyes half open, staring at the ceiling. You don't have to be strong right now, I said softly. She sat up slowly, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. I didn't want them to think I was a baby. I sat across from her. Do you want to tell me what happened? From the beginning? She nodded. You drove away, she said, and I went to the door like you told me. Her voice sounded rehearsed, like she'd replayed the moment during the entire walk home. Grandma opened it, she continued. She looked surprised, like she forgot I was coming. A tight feeling formed in my chest. Then Aunt Rachel came over and said it was really full, Chloe said. They were already eating. What about your cousins? I asked gently. They could see me, she said quietly. They just kept eating. Her hands twisted in the blanket. They said there weren't enough chairs, she added. Grandpa said maybe we could celebrate another day. Another day. As if Christmas waited politely on a calendar. I tried to give Grandma her gift, Chloe whispered. She said, not now. Tears slipped down her cheeks, quick and embarrassed. I thought if I waited outside, maybe they'd change their minds. My chest tightened painfully. But then Grandpa said it was cold and I should go home. You walked away alone? I asked softly. She nodded. I didn't know which street at first, she admitted. Everything looked different at night. I imagined her passing glowing windows filled with warmth while carrying gifts meant for people who had already decided she didn't belong. What were you thinking about? I asked. She hesitated a long time. That maybe I did something wrong, she said finally. The honesty of it nearly broke me. I moved beside her and pulled her into a hug. You listened to me, I said quietly. Nothing about tonight was your fault. She nodded against my shoulder, though I knew part of her still wondered. After a while, her breathing slowed again. This time when she slept, it was deeper. I carried her to bed and tucked the blanket around her carefully. Standing in the hallway afterward, I felt something settle inside me. Not loud anger, but clarity. I returned to the kitchen and stared at my phone on the counter. 3 missed messages from my mother. None asking if Chloe made it home safely. All about how busy dinner had been. I didn't answer. Instead, I placed the ornament carefully on the table and looked again at the painted words. Family first. 5 hours earlier, my parents had decided who counted. They just didn't realize yet that decisions like that don't end when the door closes. Sometimes they're only beginning. And somewhere deep down, I already knew this story wasn't going to end the way they expected. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Chloe standing on my parents' porch, shoulders pulled inward, hands full of gifts she had been proud of only hours earlier. My mind kept trying to rewrite the memory, imagining the door opening again, someone calling her back inside. But no one had. Around 3 in the morning, I gave up pretending and walked back into the kitchen. The Christmas lights we'd hung across the window blinked slowly, casting red and gold reflections across the counter. The gift bags were still there, waiting. I sat across from them, elbows resting on the table, and let myself think something I had avoided for years. This hadn't begun last night. Last night had only revealed it. Growing up, my older sister Rachel had always been the easy child, confident, outgoing, naturally fitting into every situation. My parents loved that about her. Teachers praised her, relatives remembered her birthdays without reminders, and every success she had somehow became a family achievement. I was different, quieter, careful, the kid who thought too much before speaking. When guests visited, introductions followed a familiar pattern. "This is Rachel," my mother would say proudly. Then, almost as an afterthought, "And this is Marcus." Not cruel, just smaller. It took years before I understood that in our house, love often followed convenience. If you made life easier, you were celebrated. If you complicated things, even unintentionally, you became something to tolerate. When Chloe was born, that difference widened. Her mother left when Chloe was barely 2. No dramatic ending, no long explanation. Just distance that slowly became permanent. Overnight, I became a single parent learning everything by trial and error. I never asked my parents for money, never asked them to raise her, but I hoped they would love her naturally. At first, they played the role well enough. Birthday visits, holiday photos, smiling posts online about family blessings. But the effort always felt scheduled, measured. Temporary? The one person who never treated Chloe like an obligation was my grandmother, Evelyn Harper. Evelyn showed up quietly. Groceries left at the door when work ran late. Babysitting without speeches about sacrifice. Advice delivered bluntly but without judgment. "You measure family by who stays," she once told me while rocking Chloe to sleep years earlier. "Anyone can show up when it's easy." Evelyn stayed. My parents visited her just enough to say they had. Photos taken. Short conversations followed by long absences. Ironically, the large house they lived in existed because of her. Years earlier, when they said they needed more space for family gatherings, Evelyn arranged everything through her trust so they could move in. Everyone called it their house. Technically, it never was. At the time, I hadn't thought much about that detail. Now it lingered in my mind. My phone buzzed against the counter. "Mom." I let it ring. A message followed seconds later. "You need to call me. Grandma Evelyn is upset and confused. This has gone too far." I read it twice. Upset and confused. Not "Is Chloe okay?" Not "We made a mistake." The story was already being rewritten. I set the phone down without replying. For years I had smoothed things over, apologized first, accepted explanations that didn't quite make sense, convinced myself peace mattered more than fairness. But something had changed. Maybe it was seeing Chloe try to cook dinner alone. Maybe it was hearing her wonder what she'd done wrong. Or maybe it was realizing silence had never protected anyone. I turned off the kitchen lights and walked down the hallway, pausing outside Chloe's bedroom. She slept curled beneath her blanket, one hand resting near the stuffed rabbit she'd had since kindergarten. "She belongs," I whispered quietly, "not to traditions, not to appearances, to people who chose her without hesitation." Across town, my parents were probably sleeping comfortably, convinced Christmas had ended normally. They had no idea something older than last night had finally surfaced. Because once patterns become visible, they can't be unseen. And some doors don't just close once. They've been closing quietly for years. Morning came slowly. Gray winter light filtered through the blinds, turning the kitchen pale and quiet. For a few seconds after waking, everything felt normal. Coffee brewing, heater humming softly, the calm stillness of a house at rest. Then I heard Chloe's footsteps, careful, hesitant. Reality returned instantly. She appeared in the doorway wearing one of my oversized hoodies, sleeves pulled over her hands. "Did Great-Grandma Evelyn call?" she asked. Not good morning. Not Merry Christmas. Just that. "Not yet," I said gently, setting a bowl on the counter. "She might still be sleeping." Chloe nodded, but her eyes drifted toward the gift bags still lying near the door. She avoided looking directly at them, like they might reject her again if she stared too long. "We can open some today," I offered. She shook her head quickly. "They're not for me." The certainty in her voice hurt more than tears would have. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. Evelyn calling. Chloe's entire face lifted. I answered immediately and switched to video. Evelyn appeared on screen wearing her reading glasses, silver hair slightly uneven like she had pushed it back impatiently. The familiar lamp behind her cast warm light across her apartment. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart," she said warmly. Chloe smiled, brave but fragile. And then her expression cracked. Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. Evelyn noticed instantly. She always did. "What happened?" she asked calmly. Chloe glanced at me unsure. "It's okay," I said softly. "You can tell her." The story came slowly at first, then all at once. The door, the waiting, the gifts, the walk home. Chloe tried to stay composed, but her voice trembled when she reached the part about there not being enough space. Evelyn didn't interrupt. She didn't gasp. She simply listened. By the time Chloe finished, Evelyn's expression had gone completely still. "You listened to me," she said gently, leaning closer to the camera. "You did nothing wrong. Not one thing." Chloe wiped her cheeks. "You showed kindness. You brought gifts. You showed up with love. If anyone should feel ashamed, it's the people who turned you away." Chloe exhaled shakily, shoulders relaxing for the first time since the night before. Then Evelyn looked at me. Her tone shifted, calm but firm. "Marcus." "Yes?" "I gave them that house so family would always have space." I stayed quiet. "And they used that space to send a child away?" Her voice remained even, but something underneath it hardened. "I won't allow that." "You don't need to do anything right now," I said carefully. "My legs hurt," she replied evenly, "not my judgment." Despite everything, I almost smiled. She turned back to Chloe. "Next Christmas, you'll be exactly where you belong." Chloe nodded, comfort finally reaching her. We ended the call a few minutes later. The kitchen felt different afterward, heavier, like something invisible had changed direction. I was rinsing dishes when my phone rang again. "Mom," I answered. She skipped greetings entirely. "What did you say to Evelyn?" she demanded. "I didn't say anything," I replied calmly. Chloe told her what happened. A sharp exhale. "She called us this morning talking about respect and the house. You upset her." "My daughter walked home alone last night," I said. "We didn't have enough chairs," she snapped. "You're exaggerating." "She stood outside your door." "She was fine," my mother insisted. "You're raising her to be sensitive." Something inside me went very still. "You wouldn't even let her use your phone." "You should have kept her with you then," she said coldly. "She's your responsibility." The blame landed exactly where she intended. It just didn't work anymore. "We'll handle Evelyn," she added. The line went dead. I stood there staring at my reflection in the dark phone screen. Behind me, Chloe laughed softly at something on her tablet, the first real laugh since Christmas night. But my mother's words echoed in my mind. "We'll handle Evelyn." A chill moved through me, because Evelyn Harper wasn't someone people handled. She was someone who made decisions. And for the first time, I felt certain something had already begun, something my parents didn't yet realize they couldn't stop. Sometimes everything changes not with a fight, but with a phone call that sounds final. I told myself not to overthink it. All morning I replayed my mother's words, "We'll handle Evelyn," trying to convince myself she meant a conversation, maybe an argument, maybe another attempt to smooth things over the way my parents always did when appearances were threatened. But the feeling wouldn't leave. Evelyn didn't disappear into silence. By late morning, I had called her twice. No answer. Chloe sat at the dining table drawing quietly, coloring far more carefully than usual. Every few minutes she glanced up at me, reading my face the way kids do when they sense worry adults try to hide. "She might be taking a nap," Chloe said softly. "Probably," I replied, forcing a smile. I waited another 10 minutes and called again, straight to voicemail. That was when unease turned into certainty. Evelyn believed unanswered calls were rude. Even on bad days, even when she felt sick, she called back, especially if Chloe was involved. I grabbed my keys. "We're going to check on her," I said. Chloe's face brightened immediately. "Can we bring the cocoa mix she likes?" "Yeah," I said, "let's bring it." The drive across Portland felt longer than usual. Christmas decorations still hung from porches, but the city carried that strange after-holiday quiet. deflated inflatables leaning sideways, empty sidewalks, wrapping paper boxes waiting near trash bins. Chloe held the cocoa container carefully in her lap like it mattered. "Do you think she's mad at me?" she asked suddenly. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. "No," I said firmly, "not even a little." She nodded, though doubt still lingered in her eyes. Evelyn's apartment building came into view, brick walls pale against the gray sky. I parked and hesitated for a moment before getting out, instinct warning me something wasn't right before I knew why. We walked upstairs together. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, louder. Still nothing. "Maybe she's sleeping," Chloe whispered. Maybe, but Evelyn didn't sleep through knocking. I pulled the spare key from my pocket, the one she'd given me years ago for emergencies and stubborn situations. The lock clicked open. The apartment felt wrong immediately. Not messy, not disturbed, just empty. "Grandma?" I called. No response. The living room looked neat, but something important was missing. The blanket she always kept over her chair was gone. Her wheelchair wasn't by the wall. My heartbeat sped up. I checked the bedroom. Empty. Bathroom. Empty. Kitchen untouched. Behind me, Chloe's voice came small. "Where is she?" "I don't know," I admitted. Fear crept in slowly, cold and steady. I stepped back into the hallway and knocked on the neighbor's door across from hers. A woman opened it wearing a robe, her expression already sympathetic, the kind people make when they know something you don't. "You must be Marcus," she said gently. My stomach dropped. "Yes, have you seen Evelyn?" She hesitated only briefly. "Your parents were here early this morning," she said. "They had a car downstairs. They took her." "Took her?" I repeated. "They had her chair," she added carefully. She didn't look very happy. The hallway suddenly felt too small. "Did she say where they were going?" The neighbor shook her head. "I'm sorry." I thanked her automatically, though the words barely registered. Back inside the apartment, Chloe stood frozen near the door, still holding the cocoa mix. "Did they take her?" she asked. "I don't know yet," I said quickly, "but we're going to find her." I called my mother. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. My father. Voicemail. Each unanswered call made the silence heavier. Chloe tugged my sleeve. "Maybe they took her to their house?" It was the first logical thing anyone had said all morning. We hurried back to the car. As I drove, my thoughts raced. My mother's voice, Evelyn's certainty during our call, the sudden disappearance. They knew she was changing something. And suddenly I understood. This wasn't concern. This was control. I pulled into my parents' driveway faster than I meant to, engine still running as I stepped out. The house looked exactly the same. Decorated, welcoming, perfect. But this time I wasn't arriving as a son. I was arriving to bring someone home. Sometimes people keep listening not because of anger, but because they feel the moment when everything is about to change. I barely remember crossing the driveway. Frost cracked beneath my boots as Chloe hurried beside me, her small hand gripping mine tighter than usual. My parents' house looked warm and perfect. Lights glowing through the windows, wreath hanging neatly on the door, everything arranged to look like a place where families belonged. It felt staged now. I knocked. Hard. Footsteps approached almost immediately, slow and deliberate, like whoever stood inside already knew who it was. The door opened. My mother stood there, composed as always, sweater neat, hair perfect, expression already prepared for conflict. Her eyes flicked briefly toward Chloe before settling on me. "You need to calm down," she said. "Where is Evelyn?" I asked. No greeting, no small talk. Her smile tightened. "She's resting. I want to see her." "That's not necessary." The dismissal landed heavier than shouting would have. "We went to her apartment," I said evenly. "She's not there." My mother crossed her arms, positioning herself firmly in the doorway. "She's staying here for a few days," she replied. "She needs quiet, not drama." Behind me, Chloe stood very still, clutching the cocoa container against her chest. "I'm not here to argue," I said. "I just need to know she's okay." "And I told you she is." She didn't move, didn't invite us inside. The same doorway, the same refusal Chloe had faced the night before. My father appeared behind her, irritation already written across his face. "This isn't a good time," he said. "You're upsetting her." "Then let her tell me that herself," I answered. Silence stretched between us. My mother's jaw tightened. No. That single word changed everything, because this wasn't family tension anymore. This was control. I felt Chloe's fingers tighten around mine. I squeezed back gently, then pulled my phone from my pocket. My mother's eyes narrowed. "What are you doing?" "Making sure she has a choice," I said. I dialed 911. Her composure cracked instantly. "You are not calling the police over this," she hissed. I spoke calmly when the dispatcher answered, explaining only facts. My elderly grandmother was missing from her residence, her mobility equipment had been removed, and I was being denied access to confirm her safety. No accusations, no raised voice, just truth. "You're embarrassing this family," my father muttered. I ignored him. The wait felt endless. Chloe leaned quietly against my side while my mother paced inside the hallway, whispering angrily about overreaction and disrespect. When the police cruiser finally pulled into the driveway, relief hit so suddenly my knees almost weakened. 2 officers approached calmly. "Someone requested a welfare check?" one asked. "Yes," I said. My mother stepped forward quickly, smile switching on like a light. "There's been a misunderstanding. We still need to see your mother," the officer said politely but firmly. Her smile faltered. "She's sleeping." "We'll be quick." The tone didn't change, but it didn't allow refusal. After a long moment, my mother stepped aside. I walked in behind the officer's, heart pounding. The house smelled like cinnamon and roasted food. Leftovers from the Christmas dinner Chloe had never been allowed to join. They led us down the hallway. The back bedroom door opened. Evelyn Harper sat in her wheelchair near the window, blanket across her lap. Her posture was straight, eyes sharp despite clear exhaustion. The moment she saw Chloe, her expression softened. "There you are," she said. Chloe rushed forward and grabbed her hand. "I thought you were mad," Chloe whispered. Evelyn's eyes flashed. "Not at you." One officer crouched beside her. "Ma'am, are you here because you want to be?" My mother stepped forward quickly. "She's confused." Evelyn turned her head slowly. "If you interrupt me again," she said calmly, "I will remember it." Silence fell instantly. The officer waited. Evelyn looked directly at him. "No," she said clearly. "I want to leave." Relief flooded through me so strongly it almost hurt. The officers nodded and stepped back, creating space. No lectures, no arguments, just permission. As I helped wheel her toward the door, my parents stood frozen, watching control slip away. Evelyn didn't look at them once. Outside, cold air filled my lungs. Once we reached the car, she looked at me and said quietly, "Call my lawyer." And in that moment, I understood. Christmas hadn't been the ending. It had only been the beginning of consequences. The drive to Evelyn's lawyer's office was quiet. Not tense, just steady, like everyone understood something important had already been decided, and words might only slow it down. Chloe sat in the back seat beside Evelyn, holding her hand the entire way, as if letting go might somehow undo what had just happened. Evelyn watched the passing streets through the window. She didn't look angry. She looked certain. Downtown Portland moved calmly around us. Storefront windows still decorated from Christmas, lights blinking softly beneath gray winter skies. People carried coffee cups, couples walked bundled in scarves, and life continued normally, completely unaware that a family's foundation was quietly shifting inside our car. "You didn't have to do this today," I said gently. Evelyn didn't turn. "Yes, I did." Her tone left no room for debate. We parked outside a modest brick building near the courthouse. A brass plaque beside the entrance read, "Harper and Lowe Legal Services." Evelyn insisted on wheeling herself inside, brushing away my offer to help with a small wave of her hand. Her lawyer, Daniel Lowe, greeted us immediately. He didn't look surprised. "Evelyn," he said warmly, "I suspected I might hear from you." "We need to correct something," she replied. He nodded and led us into his office. Shelves filled with binders lined the walls, decades of decisions preserved in paperwork and signatures. Daniel opened a folder already waiting on his desk. "I assume this concerns the trust," he said. I glanced at Evelyn. "Trust?" She looked at me briefly. "The house." Daniel folded his hands calmly. "Your parents have referred to the property as a gift," he explained. "Legally, it belongs to Evelyn's living trust." I blinked. "They don't own it?" "Not while she's alive," he said. "They are beneficiaries, meaning they were scheduled to inherit later. Beneficiaries can be changed. Evelyn tapped the armrest of her wheelchair once. And they will be. Daniel nodded professionally. Before we proceed, I need to confirm you're making this decision voluntarily. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. Daniel, I've lived through 3 decades of family holidays. No one tells me what to do. A faint smile crossed his face. Understood. He slid a document toward her. By signing this amendment, he explained, David and Susan Bennett are removed as beneficiaries of the property and related assets. You may designate new beneficiaries. Evelyn picked up the pen without hesitation. Before signing, she looked at Chloe. I gave them space so family would always have room, she said quietly. They chose otherwise. Chloe squeezed her hand. Evelyn signed. The sound of pen against paper felt louder than expected. Final and irreversible. Daniel placed another document forward. We should also update financial distributions while we're here. Evelyn nodded. Yes. He outlined everything carefully. Savings accounts, medical provisions, investment allocations. A portion remained for Evelyn's care. The rest would be reassigned according to her wishes. To Marcus Bennett, he confirmed, writing my name where another had once been, and education funds for Chloe. Evelyn added firmly. My throat tightened. You don't have to do that. I do, she said simply, because family should be protected before it's tested. Paperwork continued nearly an hour. Signatures, initials, witnesses entering briefly and leaving again. With every page completed, the certainty my parents had lived under quietly disappeared. When it was finished, Daniel stacked the documents neatly. It's done, he said. Evelyn leaned back slightly, satisfied. What happens now? I asked. They will receive formal notification, he replied, and will begin addressing occupancy of the property. Chloe looked between us. Does that mean they have to leave? Evelyn's voice softened. It means choices matter. Outside, evening light painted the sky pale gold as we returned to the car. Evelyn paused before getting in. I didn't do this because I'm angry, she said quietly. I waited. I did it because a house that turns away a child stops being a home. Chloe slipped her hand into hers again. As we drove away, I realized something my parents still didn't understand. Arguments fade. Stories change, but paper remembers. And somewhere across town, consequences had already begun moving toward them. Slow, quiet, and impossible to stop. The phone rang that evening just as I expected it would. I was in the kitchen reheating leftovers while Chloe sat in the living room beside Evelyn, patiently teaching her how to scroll through movie options on the television. Their quiet laughter carried down the hallway. Soft, genuine, the kind of sound that made the house feel alive again. For the first time since Christmas night, things felt calm. Then my phone began vibrating across the counter. Mom! I watched it ring once before answering. She didn't bother pretending politeness. What did you do? She demanded. Her voice sounded sharp, strained, not just angry, but afraid. I brought Evelyn home, I said calmly. You went behind our backs, she snapped. Her lawyer called us. Do you have any idea what you've started? I leaned against the counter, watching Chloe laugh as Evelyn accidentally muted the television again. She made her own decision, I replied. Oh, please, my mother said. You've been filling her head with lies. Chloe told her what happened, I said quietly. A pause followed, not silence, but calculation. You've always been jealous, she said finally. This is about the house. The accusation sounded rehearsed. My daughter stood outside your door on Christmas, I said evenly. We didn't have enough room, she insisted. You had rooms, I answered. You just didn't have space for her. Her breathing sharpened through the phone. She was fine, my mother said. You're raising her to be weak. Something inside me settled completely then. The last piece of doubt disappearing. She walked home alone, I said. The world isn't gentle, she replied coldly. She needs to learn that. Across the room, Evelyn glanced toward me, one eyebrow raised as if she already knew every word being said. This isn't about toughness, I said. It's about kindness. She ignored that. You think this will stand? She demanded. We're speaking to our own attorney. Evelyn isn't thinking clearly. I almost laughed. I wouldn't recommend saying that to her lawyer, I said. Her voice rose. After everything we've done for this family, for appearances, I interrupted before I could stop myself. Silence fell. Then anger rushed in to fill it. "You've always twisted things," she said. "You were difficult as a child, and you're still difficult now." I waited for the familiar sting. It didn't come. Instead, I felt distance. "I'm not arguing," I said calmly. "I'm protecting my child." "You can't shut us out," she snapped. I looked toward Chloe sitting beside Evelyn, their heads close together as they shared popcorn from a bowl balanced carefully on Evelyn's lap. Warm light filled the room. Safety. "I'm not shutting anyone out," I said quietly. "I'm choosing who feels safe in my home." The line went dead. I set the phone down slowly. For a moment, the house remained quiet except for the television playing softly. "Well?" Evelyn asked. "They're angry," I said. "Good," she replied simply. Chloe looked up, worried. "Are we in trouble?" Evelyn shook her head immediately. "No, sweetheart, trouble is what happens when people refuse to learn." Chloe thought about that, then nodded as if storing it somewhere important. Later that night, after Chloe went to bed, I sat alone in the kitchen watching frost gather along the window. My parents still believed this was an argument, something they could pressure, negotiate, or rewrite until it sounded different. They didn't understand yet that the decision had already been made long before tonight's call. The power had shifted quietly, not through shouting, not through revenge, through truth finally being seen clearly. And somewhere across town, in a house they still believed belonged to them, reality was already on its way. Sometimes consequences don't arrive loudly. They simply show up and stay. The envelope arrived 3 days later. I recognized the return address immediately. Harper and Lowe Legal Services, printed neatly in the corner in dark ink. Thick paper. Official weight. The kind of letter that didn't invite discussion. It delivered outcomes. Evelyn sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea while Chloe worked on a puzzle beside her, carefully pressing pieces together even though she kept glancing toward me. She knew something important was happening. I opened the envelope slowly and unfolded the documents inside. Legal language filled the page. Precise, calm, impossible to misunderstand. Evelyn's living trust had been formally amended. David and Susan Bennett were removed as beneficiaries. Proceedings regarding occupancy of the property had officially begun. I read it twice before lowering the paper. Evelyn nodded once. "Good." Chloe looked up. "Does that mean Grandma and Grandpa have to move?" Evelyn's expression softened. "It means actions matter." My phone started ringing less than an hour later. Dad. I let it go to voicemail. Then Mom. Then Rachel. 3 calls in less than 10 minutes. I muted the phone and turned it face down on the counter. "They won't like this," I said quietly. Evelyn gave a small, knowing smile. "People rarely enjoy consequences." Later that afternoon, curiosity got the better of me, and I listened to the messages. My father's voice came first. Controlled anger barely contained. "You've made a serious mistake. Call me immediately before this goes any further." The second message was my mother. "You manipulated an elderly woman. We're contesting this legally." The third was Rachel, sounding almost reasonable. "You didn't have to go this far, Marcus. You're tearing the family apart." I stared at the phone afterwards, surprised by how distant their voices felt. For years, those calls would have shaken me. I would have rushed to fix things, apologized just to restore peace. Now the urgency was gone, because this wasn't an argument anymore. It was paperwork. 2 days later, another notice arrived, confirming timelines. My parents were officially being informed about occupancy changes. Arrangements would need to be made. Reality was no longer theoretical. That afternoon, Chloe helped Evelyn place small winter plants near our front door. Their breath formed soft clouds in the cold air while they worked together. "Why plant flowers now?" Chloe asked. Evelyn smiled faintly. "Because spring always comes, even when people think winter lasts forever." Inside, my phone buzzed again. A text from my mother. "You're destroying everything over one misunderstanding." I stared at the message. One misunderstanding. I thought about Chloe standing outside in the cold, holding gifts she had made with care, about the burned pan, about her whispering that maybe she had done something wrong. No, it hadn't been one moment. It had been years. I locked the screen without replying. That evening, after Chloe went to bed, Evelyn and I sat quietly in the living room watching frost gather along the windows. "I never wanted it to end like this," I admitted. "It didn't end because of you," she said calmly. She looked toward the hallway where Chloe slept. "It ended because they showed me who they were when they thought a child didn't matter." Her voice wasn't angry, just certain. Across town, my parents were likely packing boxes in a house they had believed was permanent, security turning slowly into uncertainty. Evelyn watched the night quietly. "I gave them space to build a family," she said. "They used it to decide who counted." I didn't know what to say, because she was right. The next morning, Chloe taped her handmade ornament, the one that had never been accepted, onto our refrigerator. Family first. This time, the words didn't feel hopeful. They felt true. And for the first time since Christmas night, I understood something clearly. This wasn't revenge. It was correction. Sometimes the loudest ending isn't shouting. It's a letter that doesn't need a reply. 1 year later, Christmas came back quietly. Portland was wrapped in cold winter rain instead of snow, streetlights reflecting across wet pavement while warm light spilled from our windows into the evening. Inside the house, the same house my parents once believed would always belong to them, laughter moved easily from room to room. Not careful laughter, not polite laughter, real laughter, the kind that didn't ask permission to exist. Evelyn sat near the fireplace, wrapped in a thick knitted blanket Chloe had picked out herself months earlier. Over the past year, we had made small changes throughout the house. A ramp near the front steps, wider paths between furniture, railings along the hallway. Practical changes. But they transformed the space into something it had never truly been before. Welcoming. Safe. A home designed around people instead of appearances. Chloe hurried past carrying a box of ornaments, nearly slipping before catching herself and laughing. "Slow down," I called. "I am slow," she argued, grinning. And that was the biggest difference. She no longer moved like someone afraid of being in the way. The tightness that once lived in her shoulders was gone. She filled rooms easily now, talked freely, laughed without watching faces first. Healing had been quiet, gradual. But it had happened. Evelyn watched her carefully, satisfaction softening her expression. "Children grow differently when they know they're wanted," she said. I nodded. The legal process had finished months earlier. My parents moved out after exhausting every argument they could attempt. There were angry emails, shifting apologies, accusations that Evelyn had been manipulated. I stopped answering. Not out of anger, out of peace. Evelyn officially moved in with us shortly afterward, declaring she had entered what she called retirement supervision mode. Her savings were arranged exactly how she wanted. Security for her care, stability for our future, and a college fund quietly waiting for Chloe when the time came. Security without conditions. Something Chloe and I had never truly known before. She carefully hung ornaments along the tree branches, pausing when she reached a small wooden circle tied with gold ribbon. The ornament, the one she had carried home the year before. She hesitated only a moment before placing it front and center. Family first. Evelyn wheeled closer, studying it. "Well," she said softly, "now it's finally in the right house." Chloe smiled, not nervous, not hopeful, just happy. The doorbell rang. For a brief second, silence filled the room. Old memories flickered through my mind. Another Christmas, another door, another child waiting outside. Chloe looked at me. "Are you going to get it?" "Of course," I said. I opened the door. Cold air rushed in along with distant sounds of neighbors celebrating. A delivery driver handed me a small package and wished us a Merry Christmas before heading back down the walkway. I closed the door gently. No hesitation, no exclusion, just warmth waiting inside. Later, we sat around the dining table together. Mismatched plates, overlapping conversations, Evelyn correcting Chloe's exaggerated storytelling with playful seriousness. At one point, Chloe looked around thoughtfully. "There are a lot of chairs," she said. Evelyn reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "A good house always has enough," she replied. I realized then what had truly changed. It wasn't ownership. It wasn't money. It was the absence of fear. No one here had to earn their place. After dinner, Chloe curled beside Evelyn on the couch, while rain tapped softly against the windows. Tree lights reflected in the glass, turning the room warm and calm. I thought back to that night a year earlier. The burned pan, the untouched gifts, the silence of a child trying not to cry. I hadn't shouted. I hadn't fought. I had simply chosen differently. And sometimes that's all justice really is. Choosing who stays. Choosing who belongs. As midnight approached, Chloe whispered sleepily, "This is my favorite Christmas." Evelyn smiled. "Mine too." And in a house that finally had enough room, no one ever stood outside the door again. And if stories like this stay with you, it's usually because somewhere inside them, we recognize what real family is supposed to feel like.